Pilkuli, which was a camp for the Russian prisoners.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a little hospital with doctors. All of them were Russians.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, we came back, and I told Mirke that I have to take Tola to the hospital. He knew where.
Mm-hmm.
And he took me by horse and buggy. It was quite a distance, and I left her in the hospital. Next two beds were occupied by two other people who survived.
Mm.
And we knew each other. One of them, also named Raya Perlman, she was living in the same room in a camp. Okay, and then Mirke drove me back to his house.
Mm-hmm.
A day or so later, and I wasn't feeling well, I had diarrhea, I couldn't eat. And I said to him, now you take me to the hospital because I don't feel well. And he did.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he even came to visit me, and he brought some food. And we stayed in the hospital. And we wanted to be discharged. Yeah, because some of my friends from
Sorry,
the
one second.
camp...
Mom, do you want to make yourself useful and get me some wine?
I can't hear what you're saying.
I asked her to get me some wine. I feel like
Say a little
Oh,
nicer.
all right.
I'm-
Disrespectful.
it's disrespectful.
Make yourself useful.
Mom, I'm kidding.
Do I have mine? Probably.
That's what she said last night.
Probably sure to check the cabinets. I don't know who's bringing what.
Okay.
Okay, should I go on?
Mm-hmm.
So we stayed in the hospital. There were people to help us. So it was Tola and me,
Mhm.
Raya Perlman, and a woman who was a nurse years ago,
Mm-hmm.
Kantarovich, Rochele.
Tequila
And we
open,
all got
Sorry.
along.
and there's red wine, but I'm not gonna touch the bottle, you know, we're gonna open a bottle,
So whatever's open, it's fine.
there's nothing open. Do you
Oh,
want tequila?
then red because it's easier to open, please. To keep open, right? Or, I don't know.
No, it'll go bad, take it with you.
Oh, okay, whatever. I can't take with me, but. Sorry.
So we all were weak, and Tola and I, we couldn't eat. And the food they would bring us was, like oatmeal.
Mm-hmm.
But this oatmeal in America doesn't have the husk.
Mm-hmm.
The oatmeal they gave us had the hard shell on it.
Mm-hmm.
We couldn't eat it.
Yeah.
And it was just no appetite. So the boys from survivors who knew us
Mhm.
from the camp, when they were there in the old camp, the Russians came and they had a lot of food,
Mm-hmm.
and they would come and visit us, and I told them that I can't eat the food, so they would bring potatoes. The Russians were kind
Mm-hmm.
to the survivors. They even hooked up with the soldiers hooked up with some Jewish girls,
Mhm.
young people. And they would come and they would bring us like potatoes, but it had to be cooked. Our friends were nice to us. Now, they were saying that the Russians planned to send the prisoners,
Thank you.
the survivors, back to our hometown, which was Vilna.
Mm.
They wouldn't discharge us from the hospital because at night the fever would come back.
Mm.
And first it was fever and chills, and my heart was pounding. So Dr. Burzhansky, who was a doctor, he came to visit, and he told the nurse that she ought to give me, to quiet down my heart, she should give me some drops called Lily of the Valley in translation. Lily of the Valley was calm down the beating, fast beating of the heart, which was very uncomfortable. And I was so weak. But there was a Russian nurse who was actually, she was also sort of prisoner during the war. Her name was Nina, and she was originally from St. Petersburg, that was called Leningrad, and she was very kind. She used to tell me about the city of Leningrad, which I visited. Being in America, I visited. It was a beautiful city, and I was thinking of her. Anyway, they wouldn't discharge us from the hospital if we still had fever. So the Russian nurse would give us thermometer. We should put under the arm to check temperature. Tola and I wanted to be discharged in a bad way and go back to the camp to be with the other prisoners, because rumors said they are going to return, the Russians are going to return the survivors to Vilna. And I didn't want to be stuck in Estonia, you know. I wanted to be with my own people. But since I had fever, they didn't want to discharge me because it's a contagious disease. So Tola and I learned a trick. The nurse would give us the thermometer and she would come back later to check. So I would take the thermometer, I see I have fever, so I would shake it down and she would come. She thinks my temperature is normal. And Tola, we did anything to get out of that hospital and be with our own people. So they discharged us. But I didn't feel well. At night, I would feel chills and the temperature. I was still sick, but I wanted to be with my own. I didn't want to be on the mercy of the Russians. And by the way, after I took Tola to the hospital, next day I wanted to visit her. It was a distance. I didn't want to bother Mihke. So he had a bicycle. I said, give me the bicycle. I am going to see my sister. So the hospital area was surrounded with Russian guards for protection, I don't know for what. And I came on a bicycle, and I don't remember on the way to the building or out of the building, a Russian guard took out the gun and he says to me, don't move, I'm going to shoot you. Where are you going? Where are you coming from? I said, I'm visiting my sister, so he let me go. I said, my sister is sick and I'm from Klooga. But he was ready to shoot. They're wild, these Russians. Okay. So they discharged us, and the boys, the two brothers and some other guys, came to help us. Since we didn't eat, we looked like skeletons. But every day they would give us the horrible oatmeal that we couldn't eat, and they would give us bread, but we couldn't eat the bread. But not knowing where the next meal would come, we saved the bread, and it was like Zweibeck, like Suchari. For a long time after the hospital, there was hardly any food even during the liberation. So we ate old bread, better than nothing. So they discharged us, and we came to the camp, and the people in the camp were jolly and happy. They are alive, and they were given a lot of food from the Russians, and they cooked and they baked. And there was an older woman whose brother was the head of the men's camp, Meltzer. When she saw me, she went to the kitchen and baked some pastries and gave it to me, because I was emaciated and taller too. But the people were nice, but I still didn't feel well with the fever and the chills. And then the day came that we are going to board trains and we are going back to our hometown. And all the people and they were terrible things. There was one girl who went to my high school. She was younger. In the camp, she had a mother and a sister whom I remember from school. She worked as a maid for the Germans, and that was a good job. And she befriended another Jewish woman who didn't look Jewish. She was of a German descent, Marie. And they were told about this day the camp is going to be exterminated. But she was not supposed to tell anybody. She was limping. And she had a sister, Emma, and a mother in the camp.
Mm-hmm.
She didn't tell the mother and the sister that it's going to be exterminated. And she had a chance to survive with Marie. The Germans helped her or something. She went, a nerve, she went to her mother and sister, and she asked them, they had a little money or some valuables. She asked for that and didn't tell the mother and sister that they are going to kill all the Jews. And they died, and she survived.
Why did she tell them?
So all the survivors knew about her and Marie, they hated her. So after a while, somehow she departed from the rest of the people. And then there was a Jewish man, Shapiro, who also disappeared because he was under the Russians. He was collaborating with the Russians. With the Germans, he was collaborating with the Germans.
Mm.
So the people in the camp didn't like him. So he disappeared somehow. He hid himself or something. Anyway, so they put us on a train,
Mm-hmm.
and we are all happy, and there were only 2 cars in the train, but we were sort of liberated.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a long trip to Vilna, okay? Everybody hoped maybe somebody's alive, maybe this, maybe that. And they gave us very little food, but not as bad. And they would stop when people had to go to the bathroom. There was no dish for gefilte fish. The conductor, they would stop, and people, you had to jump off the train.
Mm-hmm.
There were also cattle cars.
Yeah.
So, go and do your thing someplace in the field. So there was, and then we had very little time, but we had to rush and go back on the train,
Mm-hmm.
so we wouldn't be left in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
So there was young men among us whom I knew, because in Vilna, he and his family lived in the same place where we live. his name was Kashka, a man, he was limping. He was funny. His name was Kashka Klatschko was the last name.
Mm-hmm.
What he did, it was just a prank. When he knew that the people went to do their duties outside, he would put his 2 fingers and give a big whistle, like announcing that the train is leaving. So everybody with pants half up were running back to the train. That was the humor, the sick humor during the war and after the war. So everybody with the pants in hands was rushing to get back so they wouldn't be left alone, because you couldn't trust the Russians.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if they say you have a few minutes, you have to be there
Before.
so they won't leave without you,
Yeah.
because they were not responsible.
Yeah. So then
And
what?
then everybody was angry at me because he thought it's a joke. Shh, he whistled, everybody with the pants in hands was running. Now, I had a problem getting up on the train because there were no steps, it was very high. But the survivors were very nice to me, and they would help me, they would lift me up. Or I had no, I was very weak
Week, yeah.
for a long, long time. I had no strength to get back on the car. Okay, we came to Vilna at night,
Mm-hmm.
and we were all staying. And where do you go? So some survivors from the partisans were in Vilna, and they came to see maybe friends who is alive, who came alive from Klooga.
Mm-hmm.
One of them was a guy who went to school, but he didn't recognize me. And there was a girl, Lena, and Lena Zatz. I knew who she is, and I approached her. She also went to the same high school. I said, look, and when the Russians brought us to Vilna, nobody knew where to go,
Yeah.
you know? So I asked her, I say, my sister and I, can we stay where you are? We have no place to go. And she says, no, there are enough people where I live. Okay. So we have no place to go, we're homeless again. Then a young boy, about my age, comes over and says to Tola, he was my age, he was like maybe a year or 2 older, Eli. And he went to the same high school. And he approached Tola, he says, I remember you, you were a wild kid. And she went to grade school in a place where the high school was. It was downstairs. And he said he recognized her. He didn't talk to me, but I talked to him. I said, he told me his name is Eli Kroll.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, look, we don't know anybody to go to.
Hmm.
He said he lives with his friends, and he gave me the address. He says, I am not supposed, he worked for the government. He was like a spy.
Oh.
I am not allowed to have people staying in my apartment, but if you have no place to go, then come. Meanwhile, Raya Perelman,
Mm-hmm.
the woman who survived and was sick in the hospital,
Mm-hmm.
she was clinging to me because she came to camp. She was from Lithuania,
Mm-hmm.
and she didn't speak Polish. And besides, she could hardly see, she was nearsighted. and she was clinging to me and Tora because in Vilna everybody still spoke Polish, and she had nobody, and she was clinging where whatever we did, she did. She was a nice person. And she was from Kovna, she didn't have any place where to go and sleep. So we were together, Raya and Tole and I. And I asked people who came, nobody would let you sleep where they are. People live in bunches.
So let's just kind of keep moving because I'm worried about the timing and the battery.
What?
So let's I'm worried about the timing and the battery.
Oh,
so
all right.
yeah.
So, okay.
Yeah.
So we had to go to him.
Mm-hmm.
And it was hard, and then we couldn't stay with him because he would lose his job because they were afraid. Okay, we had a very hard time in Vilna, and the Russians didn't help us. The city was bombed during the war, so to get water you have to go walk very far to get some water. We hardly had a place to stay. We had no money for food. And the Russians' motto is, say, if you don't work, you don't eat. So we were not entitled to the little coupons for bread. It was tough. And
so then how did you end up coming to America?
What?
How did you end up coming to America?
Okay, so after a while, somehow we managed to get out from Russia because there were a lot of restrictions and they were not nice. So I contact my family in America and I received a letter, and I worked for a military hospital because I knew Russian. It was even illegal way. It was where you had to bribe somebody to help you to get out, which was sort of legal for people who lived in Poland to get out, but there were obstacles. Finally, people helped us, and we got out and went from Vilna to the free part of Poland. They were very anti-Semitic, the Poles, and then we couldn't live there. So we traveled until we reached Germany, and through Jewish organization, we got to Bavaria, which was the American zone, hoping from there we'll be able to go to America. Germany was divided in zones. It was a Russian zone, nobody wanted to live there. It was a French zone, English zone, and American zone. So Munich in Bavaria was American zone. And there were a lot of camps for displaced persons, for Jews. And they provided food, they provided a place to live, and it was okay. And then from America, when the consulate didn't open in Munich, so I had to wait to get my relatives to send me an affidavit, but it couldn't be done until an American consulate opened in Munich. And meanwhile, through friends, I had a nice displaced persons camp where I learned to be a nurse, and I worked there, and I had good friends, and it was beautiful surrounding. It was a monastery there. They had nuns there, and they had monks there. And the Jews, the Americans made sure the Jews have a nice place to live, and they had a hospital in which they treated the German soldiers during the war. The Jews took over the hospital. The Americans were wonderful. they took over the hospital. That's where I worked, in the maternity. And I had to wait a year and a half. My quota, it was a quota to go to America. And it depends on if you were from Lithuania or from Poland. My quota, I had to wait a year and a half
Oh, so what year did you
to go back
over?
to America. And eventually I did.
What year did you go?
I came to America in 47. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
And that's it. I'm here in America.
There's a great story though about
Yeah.
John
But
Hersey.
it wasn't easy. And even
Ask her about
going
John Hersey.
to America, we had a terrible storm.
Yeah.
And instead of traveling by very bad boats, it was not a luxury boat. It was for transportation of the American soldiers. And they were little, uncomfortable boats. And the minute we went to Bremen, which is a port, and from there we had to wait in Bremen to get this little transport boat to come to America.
Mm-hmm.
And when we boarded the boat, the first night they gave us food. We were never really had good food all this time. And there was like a buffet on the boat, and everybody ate like pigs. They were kind of, you didn't know what you were
Welcome
eating.
to America,
But yeah,
land of
and
pigs.
they were also, they gave us $7 each. But the 1.5 years, it was a lot of headaches to get ready to come to America. It wasn't easy.
Mm-hmm.
But here we are on the boat, and we have plenty of food, and each one got $7 present.
Mm-hmm.
And people said to me, did you drink Coca-Cola? You could buy Coca-Cola for 5 cents, 10 cents. I said, no. They say, try it. So I bought a bottle of Coca-Cola. I thought it's terrible. It tasted like medicine to me. I couldn't drink it.
Yeah.
So that was the first evening, plenty of food. The accommodations were terrible because it was a transport boat called Ernie Pyle, after the reporter. And the beds were triple.
Mm.
But we didn't care. We
Yeah.
were going to America. At night, a storm was so bad. Everybody was sick and
Yeah.
throwing up. It was terrible.
Yeah.
The boat was like this.
Yeah.
It was a bad time of the year. It was in March.
Mm-hmm.
And next day, there were hardly few people coming to the dining room because everybody was sick.
Yeah.
And to make a long story short, instead of being 10 days on the ocean, we were 20 days. So after a few days, they announced from the radio that our ship almost drowned because of the storm,
Yeah.
and only sank to the heroism from the captain who survived.
Wow.
He managed to anchor the ship.
Mm-hmm.
So there was no more food on the ship, and the ship was disabled,
Mm-hmm.
and we had to wait. And somehow they got to Plymouth, England. This was on schedule.
Mm-hmm.
And we had to leave, everybody had to wait until another ship, Marine Marlene, was coming back from America, and they were supposed to stop in Plymouth, England, and take us to America, because our ship was disabled, it was broken. So we spent the whole day. Then they brought a little bow, a little something.
Mm-hmm.
They called our names. We went down.
Keep talking. I'm just gonna get some water.
Okay.
Yeah. You can keep talking.
I'll talk to you when you come
Okay.
back.
Okay.
It seems like yesterday.
Well, what about that story with,
I can hear. I took out
I
my
think
hearing
we
aids.
need to wrap it up soon though, because
What,
it's
what?
getting quite long. I think we need to wrap it up soon.
All right.
Okay.
So that's how I came.
Mhm.
And yes, so we boarded another ship that we had to wait for.
Mm-hmm.
And then they brought a little, I don't know what you call it. We had to, each name was called, and each person had to take the luggage, which was luggage, probably a pillowcase or something. And they moved us to the good ship.
Mm-hmm.
Was also not a luxurious ship.
Mm-hmm.
And the same night, another storm broke out.
Mm-mm.
Everybody got sick again. Anyway, somehow we arrived in America April 1st, April's Fool, and that's it.
1948.
What?
Or 1947 or 1948.
1947. Okay?
Okay.
So that's it.
Right.
That's enough.
Thank you.
I skipped a lot of details because
I
we
thought
don't
the
have-
interesting part was with.
I took out the hearing aid.